All right, I'll go for it. Welcome this afternoon to becoming a productive .NET developer with JetBrains Rider. Now, before we dive into anything, I want to have a quick show of hands about who is using Rider right now. Okay, a couple of people. Who's using ReSharper? Who's not using any of them? Good, even a couple of non-believers yet. I'll try to change that. The goal of this talk is basically to walk you through what Rider is and what it can do for you. Basically a tips and tricks kind of thing in how it can help you become more productive. For the ReSharper people in here, Rider is actually built on top of ReSharper, so all of the shortcuts, or at least a lot of the shortcuts, are going to be the same. So I hope after this session you at least take away some of those tips and tricks for ReSharper as well. So let's get started. For those of you who don't know Rider yet, Rider is a cross-platform, full-stack .NET IDE. Supports all languages, so VB.NET, C#, F#, whatever you want. All frameworks as well. If you're on Windows, you can do .NET Framework, Mono, .NET Core, and so on. If you're on Mac or Linux, you can do Mono or .NET Core, so all of that is supported. If you're on Windows, and I think Nico in the audience can probably confirm, there's even WinForm support if you're on Windows. So if you need that, that's also there. Yes. It's lightweight, fast, and a full IDE. So the idea of Rider was to bring you the full IDE experience, everything you have in there, all of the analyzers, all of the navigation between different files and so on. And it's built on top of IntelliJ and ReSharper, which means all of the shortcuts, of course, from ReSharper are going to work, but also a lot of the features that ship in IntelliJ. Anyone using that one? All right. A lot of the things that come from IntelliJ will also be available in Rider, so it's a bit of the best of both worlds there. There's a free trial. I have this nice URL, riderid.net/Maarten, so if you want to try it, go and download it there. With that, that's the end of my slides pretty much. Let's dive into a demo. Now, before we dive into actual Rider demo, I want to show you quickly one of the applications that we have, which is called JetBrains Toolbox. Anyone using that one? Okay, a couple of people. That is our unified installer for all of the IDEs that we have, but the nice thing is that you can install side by side, so I have multiple Rider versions on my machine. I have a stable one as well as a nightly that I have here. For the demos, I will be using the nightly, so I have an excuse if something fails. But just to give you an idea, you can also use this toolbox to install whatever amount of instances of Rider, whichever version you want to install side by side, without having to switch between whatever is in there. Right, this is Rider. If you open it the first time, actually I'm gonna remove my slides there, which is not possible, but this is Rider. The welcome screen by default will just show you that you can open a solution, get something from version control, etc. Or you can open an existing project that you may have. Projects can be grouped, so you can have this tree of projects that you have there. And like many things in Rider, it is searchable. So if I'm looking, for example, for ReSharper 2018, this project that is way down the list, I can start typing ReSharper and it will find it and I can immediately open it if I want to. So this trick works in the welcome screen, but also in a lot of other places that are in the IDE. Right, this was my last demo on the stable version, because like I said, I need an excuse if I have a demo failure. So let's go into our latest nightly that we have. Actually, not the latest, it's from yesterday. But you get the idea. So Rider is an IDE, so you get all of the typical things. You get a solution explorer, you get Azure if you want. There's a commit tool window that you can use to commit changes to version control if you want to work with that. Azure gives me all the services there. There's a database tool window, so you can work with a database if you want. There's pairs that are displayed, unit test coverage, unit tests themselves, NuGets, the Git client with more things in there, database changes, the REST clients, all of those things are in there. So lots of tool windows. Now, they all take up some screen real estate, and this is maybe a first tip there. There's a small icon on the left where you can hide all of that and get more real estate for your code or whatever you're working with. Now, how do you go to your Solution Explorer? Well, first of all, you can click again and open this one, or you can press Alt-1, and that one will open. By the way, I have the presentation assistant enabled, so all of the shortcuts, all of the actions I do will show the shortcuts on there as well. Now, how did I know that Alt-1 was the Solution Explorer? Well, if you show all of the tool windows, you will see that a lot of them have this small mnemonic in front, which is basically the number of the tool window that you have. So if you press Alt plus that number, you can jump immediately to that tool window. And if you press it multiple times, you're basically toggling back and forth what you want to have there. If I want to open NuGet, for example, there's Alt 7 and I will open the NuGet tool window. Right. Also in Solution Explorer, again, I mentioned that you can search pretty much everywhere. So if I want to open, for example, the Owin project that is in there, which is a bit down, I can start typing Owin to immediately jump there and filter the projects that I have, or at least have the keyword that I'm searching for. Speaking of navigation, anyone familiar with Control-T, like probably one of the standard shortcuts in Refactoring and Rider? Well, that's also available in Rider. If you press Control-T, you will get search everywhere. You're searching everywhere. Now, I say Control-T because I'm a Windows user. I've been using ReSharper for a long, long, long time. If you're an IntelliJ user or use DataGrip or WebStorm or whatever, the actual universal shortcut for all those IDEs is Shift-Shift. Also the same in every single key map. So if you're on a Mac, if you're using whatever funky key map that you configure, Shift-Shift is always search everywhere, right? Search everywhere is really everywhere. It will search in files, it will search in classes, it will search in symbols, and so on. If you want to search more specific, if you want to search, for example, for an action, you can tap in this tool window and basically filter down to what you can do in there. Which is nice because I can search for codes, I can search for program.cs, for example, but I can also search for NuGet, go to actions, and I can open up the NuGet tool window from there. So even if you don't know all the shortcuts, if you use this search everywhere, you can basically find all that as well. Right, so let's close this one and actually start navigating. So one of the things that we really want to do in Rider is navigate around your code base. So let's say we want to search for iViewEngine. I know that's a type in there, but I have no idea in which project it is. So I can start searching for iViewEngine, and you will see it will find the file. If I go to classes, it will find the actual class there as well. If I select it and enter, this one will open and I will navigate to it. Now, I had to type the full file name. What I can also do is Control-T and search for IVE. Because iViewEngine is capitalized the way it is. I can search for IVE, iViewEngine, and also navigate to that one, so to quickly find what I'm looking for. Of course, inside the class, I have code vision where I can see the usages of this class, inheritors, exposing APIs. So where am I exposing this interface in my projects? There's more, like for example, I can open the settings, look at who has been working on this file and so on, so I can display that. Now from my iViewEngine, let's say I want to navigate to usages or implementations of this one. What I can do is, again, if I don't know the shortcuts, do a Control-T or Shift-Shift and say navigate to, find the actions, and I can navigate to. Now, you may have also seen that that action also has the shortcut listed there. So Alt backtick will allow me to navigate to whatever is related to this specific class that I have here. So Alt backtick will find all of the things there. I can navigate to the declaration, implementation, base symbols, and so on. I can, again, navigate through this list, or I can just start typing and say, for example, I want to implementation, and navigate to the implementation. So I don't even have to scroll through this entire list, just start typing and it will work. So let's say I want to go to the implementation, and there's multiple implementations. If there's only a couple of implementations, you will see this nice list where you can basically go through the list that you have there and go to a specific implementation. If you have more implementations or more references or whatever, what will happen is this one, it will open in a tool window where you can quickly see what is in there and even, for example, again, start searching for mustache and navigate through that if you want. Right, so let's navigate to, let's say, the Markdown view engine here, MDVE. Again, I can search based on the capitalization. Navigate to my Markdown view engine and my code is there, which is pretty convenient. From here again, I can find usages of this class. I can again do that Alt backtick and navigate to whatever is related to this one. There's a lot of navigations available. Do feel free to try them because there's a lot in there. One that I particularly like is the consuming and exposing APIs, which basically does analysis on your code base and finds where this type is actually used and passed around in different method arguments, for example. It takes a while because it has to scan the entire code base, but it's really useful if you're in a big refactoring and trying to figure out where this specific thing is used. Any IL intermediate language fans? None? Really? There's the IL code tool window as well, so you can jump to the IL viewer and see whatever code is there. if you want to learn, see what is going on in the background in your C# code, you can also select a line of code, and the IL viewer will also select a block of IL so you can immediately see what the actual code is there. I know, not very useful for most use cases, but just mentioning it's there. Right, I can navigate using those shortcuts, but I can also control-click. If I hover a type and control-click, I can navigate there, go to wherever I want to go, and figure out where everything is located. Now, an interesting thing is that I can also navigate to source codes in .NET Framework. So if I go into string, for example, what will happen is that Rider will either try to fetch the symbols for string, or if I cancel this dialog, which I'll do because the internet in Sweden is fast, they say, I'll cancel it, and what will happen is that a decompilation will happen and you get decompiled code of the string type there. Again, is this useful? Maybe not for string, but I have been in a lot of situations like you're using JSON parser or whatever, and you want to see what's going on under the hood, you can actually go into that source code and explore what is there. And when I say you can see under the hood, I also mean that you can place breakpoints in that decompiled code and those symbols, which means even if you don't have symbols, even if you don't have the actual source code, if you get this decompiled code, you can still place breakpoints, and now we will get a breakpoint that hits whenever we call string.join, which is kind of nice. All right, there's many more navigations. There's a lot of tool windows as well. I showed you how you can search in those tool windows, but given we only have 50 minutes, let's go to the next thing, which is inspections and code analysis. I already mentioned that if you navigate to all of the usages of the type and so on, we basically analyze what your code looks like. We build a tree of whatever is in your code base and then allow you to jump to it. Well, we do a similar thing in trying to figure out how your code fits together and continuously analyzing your codes. So for example, if I navigate to, I have a program.cs there somewhere, it's this one. This one has a bunch of inspections that run. So first of all, you will see that there are some unused usings. I guess everyone's familiar with this. If we gray this one out, you know those usings are not needed, and you can Alt-Enter and remove those unused directives in there. Now, Rider also comes with a very easy way of looking at the code quality of a specific file. So you see on the right-hand side here, this red dot. This can also be a yellow warning sign or a green check mark. This basically gives you a good overview of the quality of your code. So if you have some errors, you will see there's errors, there's suggestions as well, so I can improve my code based on that analysis. So let's look at a couple. In the navigation bar here, you can also see, or in the scroll bar, that there's a couple of errors that I can jump to, and you can see all of the things that are going on there. Now for every error in inspection that you see, you can actually hover and see what is wrong. So for example, this one is a property that returns an integer. I'm returning a string, so this will probably not compile, and I get back it cannot convert expression type string to integer because that's, well, obvious, I guess. Most of those inspections also have quick fixes. And I know this is probably not the best example, but if you return a string in an integer method or an integer property, you can Alt-Enter and say, okay, call convert to int, and all of a sudden my code compiles. Not the best approach to fix this specific error, I must admit, but at least we got to fix our code based on what Rider figured out. There's all of those. There's also suggestions on how you can use new language features. So everyone familiar with expression-bodied members and so on? Yeah. So this is older code. I wrote it in C#5, and I've now set my code. You can actually do that from the properties of your project. I set my code to use the latest C# version, which means that I get all of those new features like expression-bodied members. And what I can do is look here. You can see that the get is also grayed out because we don't really need it. And we can see that we can use expression-bodied properties for just this specific one. So what we can do is Alt-Enter again, and make this a two-expression-bodied property, and our code base is updated with this new C# language feature. Now, you don't probably want to go through your entire code base and fix all of those instances. You want to fix all of them at once, ideally. So what you can also do is for that inspection, Alt-Enter, expand that thing, and fix, for example, the body style in the entire project or in the entire solution if you just want to update all of the body styles everywhere across your projects. Also, not all inspections, but the lots, also give you this, why is Rider suggesting this? and ReSharper does the same. It also gives you that menu option. Basically, what it will give you is a link to some documentation that tells you why ReSharper or Rider is actually suggesting this and why you can use expression-bodied members and so on. And really, Swedish internet is awesome. You get the idea, right? You trust that there's documentation on this site. All right. So there's those inspections. There's a couple of other things that you can do with inspections. So imagine this expression-bodied member one. You really want to enforce your developers to use expression-bodied members all over the place. What you can also do is to set the severity of this inspection. So what you can do is configure the severity and make this, for example, an error. And what this will do is really put the red squiggly underneath and say this is an error and you can no longer compile this project because that's an error now. You can again go in and set it. I'm actually going to reset it to a hint. Yeah, there we go. These settings related to inspections can also be exported to a team shared settings file in Rider. So basically, if you want to share this settings code base or the settings configuration with your team members, you can export it into a file and everyone will have those settings enabled. Right. What else do we have there? I guess that's pretty much it in terms of inspections. There's a lot more. There's ways to suppress inspections. There's a lot of inspections not only for C#. And actually, if you want to see which inspections are available, you can go to the settings. Again, everything is searchable. So search for inspect or something like that. And you can get all of the inspections for example, ASP.NET code or for C#. And you can see all of the different, gotta remove that one. Yeah, there we go. All of the different inspections and their severity. Now, you may also see in those inspections that some inspections may be disabled by default. That is because some of the inspections don't really make sense for every one of our users, but they may make sense to you. So if there's anything in there that you think is important, feel free to go in and enable it and make sure that your code gets better and nicer because of that. So for example, if you don't use incorrect spacing, you can actually get an inspection for that as well. I mentioned C#, but also for example, JavaScript and TypeScript, it's actually just on top. For the other languages, there's also inspections that you can configure. If you do TypeScript, for example, you can get inspections for TypeScript as well. I think there's some 2,600 or something in Rider, so there's a lot to read there if you want. All right, what else is there? Editing and code generation. Imagine in my project here that I want to start writing some codes. There is a shortcut to generate or start writing codes, and that is Alt-Insert. If you do Alt-Insert in here, you will get a nice menu where you can create a new file. So for example, if I search JSON, I can create a JSON file there. If you're inside codes, if you do an Alt-Insert, you will see nothing happening, because in this context, no code generation is available. But if you're in a class, for example, Alt-Insert will give me code generation options for a lot of things that are available. Also, let's start writing some code. So imagine I have a class called person, and my class person is going to have an ID. It's going to have a string, let's say first name, and it's going to have a string last name. And by the way, there's another shortcut that you can use, which is Control-Shift-Enter, that will put you on the next line and automatically complete the current statement that you have, so you don't have to actually scroll down if you want to scroll down. Right, we have this person. You can also see it's grayed out because nobody's using it right now, just sitting there. In this person, let's imagine we want to create a constructor that can set the ID, first name, last name properties. What I can do is Alt-Insert and generate a constructor. For my constructor, I can pick the properties that I want, and then choose whether I want it to be public or private or internal or whatever, and I can optionally also add null checks. So let's add some null checks. There we go, and we now have a nice constructor for all of this, including the argument null exception if this fails. Now, I remembered C#, I mentioned C# settings. If we change this project to be, for example, C#5, and we would regenerate this code, you will see that my constructor will look different because there's no throw expressions there, so this will actually generate the actual null checks like this. If we upgrade again, there are going to be new inspections that say, this is old school code, so I can also update this one and join it with the assignment if I want. All right, I generated this through the menu. What I can also do is make use of the smart code completion that is available. Typically you have a snippet called CTOR, which will generate an empty constructor. But what Rider will do is detect that we have public properties. So there's a snippet called CTOR-P for public. And if I invoke that one, you get like a standard boilerplate constructor. No null checks and so on, but at least you can quickly continue with coding. Some other code generation is that you can, for example, generate equality members. Let's say we want to check a person whether it's equal to another person. Let's say we do that based on the ID property. Well, we can do that, and what you will see is an equals method that actually checks the reference, get hash codes, and operator overloading as well. So all of that generated based on the couple of things that I added in there. Speaking of code generation, Rider also knows about a lot of interfaces, what they mean, what they do. So imagine that we have a new property there, and that property is a stream, and that stream is going to be the photo of this person. I know, again, probably not the best example because in your DTOs you probably don't want to put a stream, but bear with me, imagine we want to write this code. Ideally, because my stream is disposable, my person also has to be disposable. So what we can do is make this disposable, implement this, and get the throw new not implemented exception. Now, that's a standard code generation, but because we also know what this interface means, there's also going to be an option called generate dispose pattern. And Rider also discovered that that photo is disposable and it should be disposed. And I can basically say, okay, generate this dispose pattern, and based again on the C# language version, I get a nice call into dispose for this specific property. Anyone doing WPF or anything that uses iNotify property changed? Come on, someone has to. Yes, couple. That's another interface that is implemented. So in terms of discovery and things that are available for a property, for example, you can Alt-Enter and make this a private method or a property with a backing field, and everything will be changed to have a private backing field there as well. If you implement iNotify property changed, let's use that one. We can also implement iNotify property changed and get, yes, add to Git. Get this onProperty changed methods as well as the event that is going to be called. Now, once we have this, Rider will also offer to not only make this a property with a backing field, but also to make this a property with change notification, because we just added that interface. And if we do that, you will see that we get a backing field, but also the onProperty changed is called for everything that we have in there. So lots of code generation that is going on in there and that you can start with. Any questions so far? Because usually when I do this talk, I tend to go on a tangent and do all kinds of other things that people are asking. So if you have a question or you want to see something else, do ask. Right? Cool. While we are editing codes, let's do another thing. You can also move code around. I know a lot of people would do something like this, where they pick this property, Control X, and then move it there, and so on. That's okay. It kind of works. But it also may mean that at some point you break your code and things will no longer compile. What you can do in Rider is hold all of your Control-Shift-Alt keys and basically move that code up. Or if you want to move it into that if statement, move it to the right, and you will get braces and it will be added into that statement body. And you can move it out and in and down and so on. Works with statements, but also works if you have a property, you can move that property down to somewhere in your code without having to do that copy pasting and making sure that your formatting is in order. So I kind of like this a lot, just to move code around. All right, let's maybe talk a little bit about refactoring. Of course, it's an IDE, so you would expect there's refactorings in there, and what you can do is refactor based on context. So not every refactoring is available in every single context, but most of them are going to be visible from Control-Shift-R, which is refactor this, and that will give you all of the refactorings available for a specific class or file or whatever. So for our person, we can move it to a file, we can move it to a folder, to a namespace, rename, save, delete, also an interesting one, because that one will check if the class is actually being used or not, and if it's used, it will warn you that you're deleting a class that's still in use somewhere in your code base. We can extract an interface, push members down, all of those things are available. Another nice one, if you like factory methods, you can also replace a constructor with the factory methods. Let's actually do that one. Let's refactor this and move it into a factory method. So create person, let's say, and we now get a nice factory method returning my person. And ideally, my constructor is now also private because I have a factory method. I can rename as well, so there's shortcuts for every single refactoring as well. So let's call this one, I don't know, employee or whatever. And we can refactor. This will update the class, it will update all of the usages and also the file name and so on. So that's kind of useful. Another interesting one is that you can move a class to a different namespace and even to a different project. So I can do, again, refactor this or Control-Shift or O, Control or O, which is move to some other place. And I can move this one to another namespace. And another namespace can be pretty much anything, any project that we have in our solutions. So let's say I want to move this one to nancy.authentication.basic. I can move it there, and what Rider will do is check all of the usages of this class. It will move it into that namespace that we just requested. I think it should be there somewhere. I called it employee, right? Yes, there we are. So it updated the namespace and moved it into that other project. Cool thing is that it will also check references. If you have project references between different projects, it will also update those, so your code keeps on compiling whenever you move something around. Alright, so that was a little bit of coding and editing. I want to quickly show you some other stuff in a different project that I have. So this is an MVC project. Anyone using MVC? I guess a lot of people, or at least Web API or whatever. In there, I have a layout, so I have a Razor page that has a layout. And in my layout, I'm making use of action links. Those action links typically have home as an index, index as the action and home as the controller name here, but they are strings. If you're here and you use Alt backtick, you can actually navigate to the implementation of home as a string, and it will navigate you to the home controller, because it knows home and home controller are the exact same thing. Same thing with that control click. If I control click on about, for example, you will navigate to about. Now, in this code example, I created a new login link helper methods, and my login link takes a controller and takes an action. Now, you already can see, based on the hints that we have for parameters there, that I probably have the order of my parameters wrong, right? But since these are strings, you don't really get compile time checking of whatever is happening in there. So what you can do in your custom implementation of that login link is annotate your parameters for that function with something that is basically a JetBrains annotation. I'll quickly remove this. And basically say, okay, this source controller is a controller, this source action is an MVC action, and once you do that, you will see that these things become red because there's no index controller and no home action, and I can actually fix that and make this home, for example, and I even get completion inside of that string with whatever arguments are available. So I can do this now, and now MVC, or at least Rider, knows what these things mean in the method that I have. Any questions? Make sense? Cool. One other thing. I know most of you, at least I would not like to admit it, but very often you get into this hairy situation where you're writing C#, and in your C# you have a variable called CSS, and that variable will at some point contain some CSS and, for example, have a color red. Or some JavaScript or some JSON, you typically get something in a string that you have to pass around because some weird edge case in what you're developing. Anyone never seen this before or never done this? Good, I like honest people, thank you. What you can do with this string is Alt-Enter and make this an injected language or reference, and you can say this is actual CSS. And once you do that, you get syntax highlighting inside of that string, and you even get code completion for whatever is in there. So I can pick my color, I get a nice pop-up of all the colors that are there. Also, if I make syntax mistakes, you get nice highlighting in there as well, and you get error checking. Now, one question you may have is, how is this shared with my colleagues? Because I did this Alt-Enter, and how do they know that this is CSS? Well, what you can do is annotate your code and say that this is of language CSS, and once you add that comment, Rider and ReSharper will know that this is actually CSS. I'll give you another example. Let's say we have some JSON, and we want to have that JSON as a string somewhere. I can mark this one as JSON. And what I can also do is edit this JSON fragment in a different editor. So if I jump to that one, you will see that I now get this nice dedicated editor for the string that I have. And what I can do is start creating an object in there and, for example, say name Maarten, and you will see this automatically get escaped in the actual source code that we have above. So that's also pretty nice to have and pretty convenient to have. This works for a lot of things that you can inject. You can even inject path references, so if you want to add directory paths somewhere in the code, you can also mark that, and you will get file system completion in there. For some types, we actually know what it's going to contain. So if you have a regex.isMatch, for example, what you get is that you can match this string with a specific regex. Well, we actually know that this pattern is a regular expression, so you automatically get code completion for a regular expression in there. So let's say A to Z, and maybe add a word boundary or whatever. There we go. And it's also auto-escaped. Speaking of this one, this is actually quite useful for regular expressions and all of those injections. But let's say you have a date. Let's say UTC now. You have a date and you want to format that thing. At some point you're going to call toString. And you can provide a format for that string. Well, control space, get completion, and you get completion for all of the different time kind of formats that are available. Not all of them are in there, but typically this gives you enough information to build your own pattern and how you want to format this specific string. Works with dates, works with integers, works with currencies, and whatever you want to output in your code base. Right, what else do I have? Oh yeah, postfix completion. That's another nice one. If you're editing code, and let's say we have an array, and that array is going to be an array that contains some integers, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just to have some stuff in there. What you can do is use code snippets and say I want to for each over my array, and let's say this one is called item, and then start working. What you can also do is instead of writing that for each snippet and filling out the parameters, just say array.forEach, and you get that entire loop and you can start working with it. That's also pretty useful. Works with switch statements as well, so if you have an enumeration and you want to generate a switch statement, just type .switch, and all of the different options will also be generated, which is pretty nice. What else did I want to show here? Yes. Imagine my regular expression foo is very bad, so this is going to throw an exception. Let's assume this is going to throw an exception. What I can do is select my code, type try, tab, and I get try catch around that thing. So just overwrite the code, type try, tab, and it will wrap it inside of a try catch. This template by default writes to console, but you can also edit this template to, for example, use a logger or whatever you want to do there to make it more interesting for your particular code base. Right, what else do we have? Yeah, I mentioned the switch statement, so that's pretty convenient as well. Anyone want to see that one? Okay, one person, let's go for it. So imagine we have a public enum foo, and let's say option 1 and option 2. What I can do is in my code create a new foo. Say this is option 1, and what I can do is foo.switch, and I get that, and if I Alt-Enter, I can also generate the switch labels and get all that generated. Which is, as I mentioned, pretty convenient. Right, multiple cursors. That's also an interesting one. I don't use them too often, but every once in a while I do use them. Multiple cursors allow you to, if you hold all of the keys and start clicking, set multiple cursors, and for example, do an end or a home or select all of that. remove it, and even in multiple cursors, you get code completion, and you can use that. And yeah, so I'm just writing the code now. If you do Control Shift Alt and basically create a number of cursors, you can start working with that. One small tip there that I very often use is if you have these lists of, let's say, Maarten, there's Nico in the audience as well. You have those things. What I very much like to do to create an array out of these things is, for example, make use of multiple cursors, do this thing, add the enters there, and then add an array around it or whatever you can do with that. So that's pretty convenient as well. Right, let's switch to version control. I have my Nancy project here, and I made some changes, and at some point I want to commit all these changes. Well, what we have is the commit to window, and there you will see all the changes that we've made, and you will see the diff view in the editor. I mentioned I'm using a nightly, so you see the dark bar there still from the previous theme that I had, but you get the diffs and can see whatever changes have been made. I can select all of these, add a commit message, and commit this into source control. Now, has anyone ever been multitasking as a developer? I guess so, right? What you can do is, in these things, create a new change list, and let's say this is bug 2. And what you can do is activate those change lists separately. And if I now go into my view engine again, for example, and I make a change here, you will see that the changes that I'm now making are attributed to this bug 2 change list. So I can work on multiple things at the same time and commit them separately and close those change lists later on as well if you want. If you have either DevOps or U-Track or GitHub issues, the names of those change lists can also be linked to your repo. So you can basically start working on a bug and the change list will automatically have the commit message and a meaningful name for whatever issue you're working on. Now, this is the commit tool window. I'm actually gonna delete this change list and move everything to default. That was the commit tool window. There's also the git tool window. The git tool window, what it will give you is, first of all, an overview of all of the branches that you have, as well as the history for every single branch. Searching is also really, really fast. So whenever you want to search, let's say, oops, let's see if that's in there. You can search and you will find all of the oopses in the history of this thing, and you can start navigating, opening it, looking at the diffs of whatever was in that change set. There's the full log as well, where you can also search and look at diffs. There's pull requests, so if you're using GitHub and you actually have it configured, not like I have here, you will see pull requests and can actually start looking at whatever is in the pull requests. And there's the console as well, which basically prints everything that you do in the Git client to console. So if you're a command line warrior and you want to learn about the command line, this will give you some information on what you can do there.
And you have support for interactive rebase?
Is there support for interactive rebase? Well, let me show you. We have our log here, and imagine that from this commit somewhere, I want to interactively rebase this one. So let's say I want to, that's not going to work. Let's do it from here. It's only one change, of course. I can't do it from there. Make a couple of changes, commit this one as well. Yeah, there we go. So now we have two changes. Let's rebase them and maybe squash them together into one change. So we can interactively rebase from here. What you get is all of the changes that are potentially involved. You can reorder them, so you can move the commits up and down. And you can pick it, you can stop editing, you can discard a certain commit, or you can merge it in or fix up with whatever previous change that you have. So yes. And then start rebasing and you will get completion and all that. Is any one of you commuting to work by train or metro and does some work on the train or metro on the way there? I see some people nodding, so cool. Has any one of you ever been in a situation where you start working on the train on a bug report or something interesting, and you get into work, some manager runs around and says, this thing is broken, you have to fix this now? It happens, right? Well, imagine I'm making some changes. And let's say I add a new method void foo. There's going to be some code in there. And let's say var x equals 1. And you make some changes and you remove this one and maybe add another one. And then you get into work and your boss says, stop everything you're doing, start working on this thing. And you go like, okay, done. I'll start working and work on whatever I have to work, or you do a git reset or whatever. The code you've been writing on the train is gone. What we have is local history. Every single change that you make, whether that's a refactoring or actual coding that you do, will show up in local history and will show everything that you've been doing over time. So there's the methods that I had, this typo that I had, I can also restore that one if I want, so you get a diff of everything in between commits. This is not Git, it's really local to Rider, it's not shared with anyone, but it's really convenient to get back any change that you may have had. How long do we keep this information? Forever? Or until you do a file invalidate caches. That's when all of that disappears. So other than that, it will stay there forever. Yes? Do we have stash functions? Yes. So in the Git view or from the commit view, you can basically, where is that one again? Git. Yeah, when you commit, you can stash the changes that you have. You can, where is that one? Again, nightly, so they moved it, but it's there, I know.
It should be in the commit window.
Yeah, it's probably in commit window. Right, how much time do we have?
Stash change.
There is stash changes and unstash changes. All right, so yeah, it's there. Cool. Couple things more. Shall I blow your mind? Yes, I will. Rider is based on IntelliJ, so that also means that we get a lot of the things from IntelliJ in our codes or in the IDE, among which the database tool window. So you can connect to any type of database, and for example, connect to a MySQL or DB2 or whatever you are using. You get all of the metadata from your tables and whatever you have. You can look at the details in the data that is in there. And if you open up a console, we also do completion for a lot of things. This query has a parameter, so if I select everything there and run this one, Rider will prompt me for that parameter, and I can, for example, say, okay, department 1, and see if we can fetch that data. We got some data, awesome. I have another console here, not sure which one. Let's go with that one. We also look at all the foreign keys that are available in our database, so we know that if you want to write a join statement on course and department for this database, you automatically get the completion for that entire join statement. If there's multiple foreign keys, it will also show both of them, and you can easily complete whatever you have in there. Any one of you using Dapper as an ORM? Yes, one person, two persons. Anyone using Entity Framework with like the raw SQL queries instead of the link that you have in there? See some nodding, cool. Then you will be pleasantly surprised that whatever you do in your code that makes use of an actual SQL query, once you have a database connection, what you can do is start writing SQL inside a string, which is what those frameworks do, and you get completion inside of that string. So I have a query here, but let's quickly remove it just for sake of demo. Once you start writing select, say star from, you get completion of your entire database inside of that string, and also a quick documentation about whatever is available in that table. Very often, you will also have the case where you have that query, but you want to quickly look at the results. Yes, you can copy-paste everything, or you can Alt-Enter and say, run this query in console, and you get back the data from whatever you had for that specific query. Right, I have 5 more minutes, I think, something like that. Let's go into debugging. There's a couple of nice things in the debugger as well. So I have a very, 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 very stupid program that reads some JSON from a people.json file. I can show you. It contains some names, some email addresses, and some child objects. I can run my code, read all the text, then deserialize into an actual object, and then I'll print everything to the console. So if I start debugging this one, you'll see a couple of things. So first of all, this one is in the latest 90s. We're continuously memory profiling whatever you run, so it will very often ask for this one. But apart from that, you can just start debugging and see whatever is going on. Couple of things here. In the debugger, we will show you the values of a lot of variables inside of the editor. Instead of having to go down and look at the watches window there, you can already see that there's some JSON that has been loaded, that people is still null, but if I continue, you will see that people now has 4 elements, and I can see all that in the editor without having to look down into the details of whatever is in there. If you do look down in the details, you can also open that list and expand that list, and you can again search. So if you want to search for my name there, you will search for all of the entries that contain my name. Now, does anyone of you write debugger display attributes typically? Or does anyone know what those are? Basically what you can do is in your class, what you can do is add something like this, where you say, okay, debugger display name email. If you write this thing, you can see the name and the email in the debugger instead of just the raw, whatever the data type is and so on. Now, not everyone does that, and you typically also want to see some different properties. So what you can do in the debugger is favorite some of the properties in there, for example, name, and all of a sudden my entire list will now render the actual name in there. If I want to add my company, child property name as well, I can do so as well, and you will also see that. I will have to pin company as well, so you can now see both the company as well as the actual name there, which is kind of useful. One more. I think a lot of you may have used this feature in Visual Studio where you drag the execution pointer and you can restart from there and then go over that again and start debugging with whatever you want to do there. In Rider, we also have this convenient thing that when you hover, you will see these things and you can immediately set the execution pointer there without having to drag it up and down. Another one is that if you want to execute everything in between without hitting any breakpoints, I just want to see what happens when this console write line is going to happen, I can also run to cursor and Rider will skip. Normally it should skip all the breakpoints and just go there and break there. But again, nightly. Great excuse. Cool. Let's do a real quick refactoring here. Let's say this print people is gonna do the filtering in a separate method. So what I want to do is refactor this, extract a method that gives me back something people, whatever you want to call it. Right. Any one of you ever wrote code like this where you have one method that calls into another one and so on? I guess yes, right? If you put a breakpoint there and you want to start, I'm losing my mouse here. If you put a breakpoint there and you want to debug into that, typically what you will have to do is step into something people, step out, step into print people if you're just interested in what's happening in that print people method, right? What Rider will do is if you use step into F11, it will ask you which method you want to jump into. So it recognizes that there's multiple of those and I don't have to jump into something people, I can just immediately jump into print people here, which is, again, quite useful.
Is that new?
That's a new one in the preview, yeah. Right, one more. Any one of you doing parallel developments and so on? Probably something that you may use less, but still quite convenient. I have a print people parallel here as well, which will do some crazy threading, and don't do this at home, but there's some threading and some things are happening and I have multi-threaded code in there. What you can do is at some point place a breakpoint, run this code, and we will get a parallel view on whatever is happening. Works with threads, works with tasks, and basically what you will see is if we run through this, you get parallel stacks. And once we get in there, I think that's because there's a thread sleep of 10 seconds. Yes. I better do this one. Alright, I'm gonna speed this one up and make this 100 milliseconds. Just because it's easier. Continue. You will get at some point when this thing actually starts joining. Why is this so slow? You should get a nice schema of all of the different threads and the call stacks that are in there. No idea why this is not working. I'm going to blame it on the preview. One last thing in the debugger, and then I have 1 minute to wrap up. If you place a breakpoint, you can also go into the options and make it suspend, add a conditional breakpoint or whatever. Another thing that you can do is make your breakpoints depend on another breakpoint. which means that your breakpoint will not hit until another breakpoint has been hit. Imagine you have a loop and every second you do some things. Maybe you don't want to end up in that loop every single second. Maybe you only want to end up in there when something else happens somewhere, and then you can create a dependent breakpoint and use that one. Right, I'm really out of time now, so let's go back to my last slide, which is basically try Rider if you want. I hope that at least if you're using ReSharper and Rider that you got a couple of tricks out of it. Did anyone not get a trick out of it? Yes, I did well. All right, thank you very much.